Hello everyone, this is Momo the Monster. Today we're going to make a door that reacts to the player standing in front of it and play around with some player haptics, vibrating the player's controllers if they have vibration-capable controllers. So to start off, I've opened up the Udon example scene. This is how I like to start off new Udon scenes. I just know it's got everything that I'm going to need. So the first thing is I'm going to do save as, make a new folder I'm going to call project, just how I like to name them, and I'll call this scene 1. Now we're going to get rid of everything we don't need. So we do want the world, the camera, the light, and then I'm going to get rid of basically everything else here except for the floor. So now we just have the world and the floor. I'm actually going to put the world spawn point back a little bit. And the first thing we want to do is build a door. So you can do this however you like. I'm going to use the built-in assets and grab a chair. And I'm actually going to build a door out of 2 chairs and a block. So I have this first chair here. This is the basic, just the model, so it doesn't have the chair component on it. Getting rid of the box collider there. And I'm going to unpack this, call this archway 1, and flip it upside down. So it kind of looks like an archway there, right? And make a copy, and then flip this one around. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make a graph where we can detect the user steps inside, and we want to move this door up and out of the way when they do that, and then we want it to move back down when they exit the area. So I'm going to grab a little VRC cube, another one here, and we're going to squeeze this and just make it a nice trigger area. We want it to cover the whole way in front of and behind the door, so it opens up when they step on it, and then when they leave the other side, it would close again. Size that up. Okay, so that's a workable area. I'm also going to change the material here. Let's unpack this prefab just so we don't mess with anything by accident. Call this the door trigger. And I've already got a material called trigger area that's kind of see-through a little bit. So we'll turn this on for now, just so you can see, what area you need to step into in order to trigger this door. So the door trigger here, we're going to want this to be a trigger collider. If it's not a trigger collider, you actually would hit it and kind of bounce off of it. So with trigger selected, we'll be able to walk through it. So now let's add a new Udon behavior. Make sure graph program asset is selected, click new program, and open the graph, nice and blank. So the first thing is we want to detect when a player enters this trigger area. So I'll hit spacebar for quick search and type player trigger and grab an on player trigger enter. And we want them to affect the transform of our door. So I'll go ahead and click on the door here and then drag its transform into the graph. It makes a door transform. Now we want to make sure that this is actually set to the right thing. So I'll click on the door trigger and check here. Okay, it's door transform. Sometimes this doesn't get correctly set, in which case we just need to drag it in and make sure it's the right one there. So what do we want to do to the door's transform? We want to change its position. Since I have search on noodle drop on, I can just drag out from here and type set position. Except I actually want the local position, set local position. So this is a good catch here. Because the door is part of the door system, its position in the world that we're going to be able to read here is offset by where this door system is. So I'm just going to change its local position here. And we'll hook it up from the trigger enter. Okay, so now when the trigger is entered, it will change the door's position to whatever our values are here. So I'm going to make the same one for on trigger exit, and then we're going to get these values. So let's type player trigger, grab the exit. I'm going to copy paste my local position, hook up the door, hook up the event here. And now let's take a look at where our door is. So right now our door is closed, right? So this is the position we want it to be in when the player exits. So let's actually start with that one. We're going to grab its current position here, which I've kind of rounded off just to have nicer numbers. And by default, we want it at negative 0.6, 2.5, negative 0.84. And when it's open, the X and the Z will be the same. So let's copy those in. Negative 0.84, but we want to move it up on the y-axis. So very simple. Let's just move it up to where we would want it to be. Get a nice number. I'll see if I can just round this off to 8. Oh, it's poking out a little bit. Let's do an 8.5. Cool. So when player enters the trigger, we will move to 8.5 on the Y. And we start at 2.5. So let's reset that to 2.5. And this is our basic graph right here. Let's go ahead and run this. So before you do build and test, make sure your client path is set correctly. This needs to point to your actual VRChat executable. And if you just open Builder or just made this project, it'll ask you to set up layers for VRChat. Go ahead and do all that. And now we're going to force non-VR for this first test and click Build and Test. All right, so we've got our big old archway here. You can see our trigger zone. Let's go ahead and enter it and cross our fingers. Yay, we entered it. That door went up, we exited, comes back down. Very simple, very effective. Doesn't look great, but it works. All right, let's get back to our graph and add some more features. All right, the next thing I'm gonna add is Haptic Event, so you can tell when you've actually triggered this door. To be able to do this, we're just going to get VRC player haptic. So this play haptic event in hand wants to know what hand you're using, and it needs a reference to the actual player. Now we'll have the reference to the player, but I want this to only fire for the local player. So we're just going to do this. Networking get local player. So this will always get the local player. I'm going to use this instead for the instance here. Now this will mean that if somebody else triggers the door, you're actually going to feel it. We'll go ahead and call that a feature for this tutorial. Now I want this to happen after the door either opens or closes. So I'm going to make a block that can take input from both of these. Using a block in this case will make it easy if I ever want to change these, which we will in just a minute. If the things aren't tied directly, it's going to make it easier to redo our routing, as you'll see in a few minutes. So when either of these things happen, we flow into here, and then we can make other things happen. So I'm going to say, play an event in the left hand, and we'll just use 1, 1, 1 for all these for now. Copy paste this event to make it also happen in the right hand. And now I'll use the second part of the block to say, okay, play left hand and then right hand in that order. Move these over. I just like to organize my graph a little bit, and I'm going to group these since this is like one thing that happens together, which is vibrate player. That's what this does. Just makes it easy to kind of keep all this separate here. Oh, I'll move this block in here too. All right, so now I know this whole thing is just to vibrate the player. Oop, almost forgot. I need to hook up the player to this one as well. All right, so now we've got our graph and everything hooked up. Let's come over here and make sure force non-VR is off. We need to check in VR in order to vibrate the controllers, and we'll build and test. All right, here we are in our scene. I'm going to walk into the area and I can feel the vibration, walk out. There it goes. Now I'm going to hold controller up to the mic just so you can hear it. So we know that's all working. That's great. All right, so our haptics are working. The last thing I want to do here is change from driving the local position directly to using animations so that our door looks a little better. So back in our scene, I'm going to choose the door and we want to animate it. So first thing is add an animator. Cool. Now that we've got our animator, I'm going to open up my animation tab and create an animation clip. I'll save this into an animations folder. Now, since the door is already closed, I'm actually going to make the door close animation first. So I'll just call this door closed. And it's so simple. All I need to do is add a property for the position of the door where it already is. I'm going to delete this other keyframe. So this animation is actually just a single keyframe of the door that's closed. Now, if I want it open, I'll make a new clip called door open. And very simple for this one, I'm just going to hit record, drag the door up to where I want it, and then stop recording. So here the door is open, and then here it is closed. Very easy. All right, with the door selected, I'm going to open up my animator tab. And we have our door open and closed in here already because we created them both on the door itself and default to door closed. That's great. So all we need to do is add in some transitions between closed and open and some parameters. We want to be able to modify a property and have it switch between open and closed. So I'll make a parameter, a Boolean, just called is open. And let's make a transition. Closed to open should happen when is open is true. Easy enough. Just going to get rid of that exit time there. And then open to closed should happen when open is false. So does this work? Let's see. I'm going to move my scene over here so I can see things a little better side by side. And let's play our scene. And I'm just going to modify this by hand to make sure I set up my animator correctly. So let's look. It's open, it's closed, open, closed. And because I turned off that exit time, we should be able to transition pretty quickly between these two. Cool. That's very easy. So we can stop our scene. And now all we need to do is make a graph that changes this is open. So back in our graph, let's drag in a reference to the animator. I'll click on door, and we'll grab this animator, drop it into the graph. I'm going to rename that door animator. Cool. And of course, let's click on our door trigger and see, yeah, the animator didn't get set up there. So I'm going to drag the door in. Since we already specified it's an animator, Unity knows to grab that animator on it. So now we're all hooked up. Now this actually refers to the animator, which is great. So we want to be able to do set bool. It's pretty easy there. And this is going to take place of set local position. So I'm going to take this noodle and hook it into here instead. And this noodle will go into here. And now I can get rid of this one, drop this in its place. Cool, so the bool we want to set, let's call it by its string. We know it's called is open. So when the player enters, we want, oops, making sure I didn't get that line break in there. We're going to want is open to be true. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy paste to get the same thing and put it in here instead of the other local position. Now we can get rid of the reference to the door transform and this set local position. We'll make sure our animator is hooked up in both instances. So now we have a graph that looks very similar to before, but instead of driving the transform values directly, we're now setting an animator, which means we could easily change that animation, make it fancier, and it'll still work. As long as this one is set to close the door and this one is set to open it. Before we do a final test of the scene, I'm going to clean something up. I don't want to see this blue trigger area anymore now that we know it all works. So I'll select my door trigger, make sure to leave the box collider itself on, and I'll just turn off this mesh renderer. So now we can clearly see the area that will be triggered, but we won't see it in the game anymore. It'll be a little more of a surprise, maybe feel a little more magical. Now that that's set up, I'm going to go ahead and enter this in VR, so we'll leave this unchecked and click Build and Test. All right, so here we are without the big blue block. And when I walk into the invisible trigger area, the door opens, I walk out, and it closes. So now we've got this nice animation. I can walk out the other side and see that it works on the other side too. So there we are, automatic door with haptics and animations.